Da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-dum. Good morning, folks. It is a beautiful day in Atlanta, Georgia. It is Gridiron 360. Thanks for joining us. I'm Bill. Dave's sitting across from me. How we doing, brother?
We are doing awesome.
We're going to preview week 4 of college football. Actually have some multiple matchups that are pretty solid. We will run down the slate, starting with a few games tonight, some early games tomorrow, midday games tomorrow, and late games tomorrow. But to highlight, you got the Vols, UT going down to the Swamp and taking on the Gators. We had a little discussion about that. We have it as one to watch because, man, would it be something if Tennessee pulled off an upset down there? Then later on, we'll have Auburn going to Texas A&M. And, we missed Michigan going to Wisconsin. Ooh, good. It's good. Yep, that'll be an early. And then, like I said, afternoon Auburn going to A&M. And then you got some Notre Dame Fighting Irish coming down south to Athens, Georgia, and to take on the Bulldogs at night.
And they have invaded the Atlanta area.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of them here already. We were downtown earlier and saw a group of them. So good. They do travel well. There was some Thursday night football last night. We've brought in Houston into the fold, obviously because they took on Oklahoma earlier in the year. We've talked a lot about D'Eriq King. You've gushed over him. I like him.
It's like the kiss of death, my gushing.
Yeah, that wasn't good. They actually lost to the Green Wave. But D'Eriq King still had a great game. He rushed for 116 yards yesterday. Let's see. Passing went for 229. 16 of 33, so not great efficiency-wise, and threw for 229 yards. He did have 2 TDs and a pick, but I think moreover, like I said, 17 carries for $116 on the ground. He didn't score, but there was. I was surprised. They were leading. I watched the majority of the game. Tulane mounted a comeback. I got to be honest, and I haven't watched a ton of Tulane, but their quarterback, Justin McMillan, number 12, he's awesome too. In terms of dual threat, this guy carried the ball for his team, 15 carries for 91 yards in a TD. And man, when I saw him get going, he can scoot, brother. He can scoot. Didn't throw the ball particularly well, was 7 for 20, 186 yards, but did have 3 TDs through the air. So the ones I did see were in close, and obviously by the yardage, that tells you how that kind of went. I think his running ability kind of pulled some of the defense, secondary, and linebackers up a little bit when they got in close. Because, man, he could scoop. But anyways, not going to stay too much on it. Like I said, Tulane won the game. They are 38-31. They are 3-1. And Houston, who I really think is a good team, is just, kind of taking the short end of the stick on this one. They had Oklahoma early in the year. They're probably not going to win that, which they didn't. And actually went toe-to-toe last Friday with my man, Coach Mike Leach, and the Cougs of Washington State, who ended up pulling it out 31-24. So they're sitting at 1-3. A little surprised at that. Friday night football, as we move on. Air Force traveling to Boise State. These Mountain West teams have been certainly in some headlines as some of the Power 5 schools have faced the Boise States, the BYUs, and they're taking losses. So it really looks good for the Mountain West. In terms of Group of 5 schools, we always hear a lot about the American, UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, but this is a year maybe where that Group of 5, in terms of a conference as a whole, the Mountain West is getting noticed. If they can keep going, that's kind of interesting. What else we got tonight? We've got the Utes traveling down to Southern Cali to take on USC, the Trojans, Keaton Slovis looked great his first week coming in for PJ Daniels against Stanford. Came back down to earth against who last week? A Mountain West team in BYU, and lost that game. So Utah rolls in there ranked in the AP at 10. The game is at 9 o'clock tonight. Utah's done its thing. You know, they're not explosive or flashy, but they're solid on the ground, and they're a defensive ball club, just like we said preseason, looking at, these different teams out there. USC, I don't know. I mean, still, they have weapons. If this kid can get to them, get the ball to the weapons, the Amon St. Browns of the world, they might have a shot at this, but... again, stingy defense. I anticipate Coach Kyle Whittingham of Utah to try to confuse the youngster. Utah and BYU matched up earlier in the year. Utah, was in Provo, Utah, and BYU's house and won 30-12. It wasn't. It was a much closer, slower, sloppy-looking game than actually the score showed. But I guess if that's any prediction, being that BYU just beat USC, the 6 degrees of separation game, then I think Utah might handle them. What do you think?
Yeah, what's interesting to me with Utah is, they've had some years where they've been a little bit more explosive. They're a defensive-minded team. They usually run a very good defense. Some running game involved in that. Athletic quarterback has kind of been the MO. I have to say, none of their wins have been – I was expecting them by week 3 to have put up what I would consider a really explosive statement win, especially for a top 10 team.
I hear you. I'm not sure that's who they are, though.
Yeah,
you think at some point they're going to have to do something about that if they really want to be the representative for the Pac-12?
To me, if you're a top 10 team – You got to be able to bury a few teams here and there, and the beginning of their slate wasn't soft, but it wasn't elite. I would have you want to see the gears start spinning for these top teams really quickly.
Yeah,
USC may not be the team to do it against because we can't figure out what we've got.
Right,
kind of a subplot to that's kind of interesting. I've watched in college football, and if you're a betting person, you can go to Vegas and bet on this. So I was looking. They were talking about odds of coaches getting fired. So, of course, as a Florida State fan, it showed up on my radar. And Taggart is the lead dog in that.
Dude.
Don't buy it only because the buyout is immense. But some of the talk that's going on, for those of you that may be aware, I think it was it the week before last where the Trojans fired Lynn Swann as the AD.
As the AD, yeah.
Yes. I think it was within the last week to 2 weeks.
It was like 2 weeks ago, I think,
so
or a week before this one.
There was that initial kind of what does this all mean? Like the AD getting fired, and Helton's certainly been on the hot seat. But there's a lot of smoke right now surrounding the idea that Urban Meyer, who
I heard
nobody's gonna no, I don't think anybody that when he left Ohio State bought the idea that his coaching career was over. The guy just I don't know what his deal is.
What is he on? The is it Fox that he does? Is college Fox College? Yep.
Yeah, usually with Leinart and I'm trying to think who else, but they there is betting odds that he will be hired. Actually, Florida State was on that list, which blew my mind. I can't imagine that going down in Tallahassee. They were the third team going for Urban Meyer. But again, going back to USC, there was a lot of talk that this change sets up the idea that Helton would be out and Urban Meyer could be for the future. I'm just kind of interested to see how this USC team performs throughout. Again, we saw them rebound in a way that looked pretty impressive and then fall back down last week. So I don't know. I think it's two teams looking to kind of figure this out. In a way, I would almost say USC is kind of dangerous to Utah right now if they can't find that next gear in their type of play. So, I think Utah will get it done. I don't know that it may be the prettiest of wins here. I'd like to see this Slovis kid make a move. I'd like to see it. I want to see
So
some of these West Coast programs.
was it like that week one? Was it all just kind of smoke and mirrors with him? That maybe and last week is the reality. I mean, what?
Yeah,
I mean,
right. That's what we don't know.
because they weren't. Stanford, as much as I appreciate the program and the coaching staff, I don't think they really had tape to prepare for a kid like that. Not that could be, not that they would come out and think he's going to be a world beater, and maybe that was probably part of the problem. But after week one, BYU, maybe not a superior team or program to USC typically, but they at least had one game of tape on the kid and maybe could draw some things up to confuse him, and I think that's what they did.
Yeah. I mean, let's not.
So I don't know what I don't know what Keaton Slovis really is. I'd like to see him be. Everybody wants. He's an underdog. I'd like to root for underdogs.
I would agree.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. And breaking news flash, and we are going to shift quickly for this to the NFL, as it temporarily is banning pyrotechnics from games. Thanks, Tennessee. Wah, wah, wah. Back to college football.
The roof is on fire.
Yeah. So, anything else you really want to chime in on this? I mean, maybe this is a game that Utah shows something. I'm.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say weeks 1 through 3 is trying to figure out who you want to be. Weeks 4 through 6, in my mind, for a lot of teams, is proving that you are that team. And I think this is a chance for both teams to try to prove what they want to be. I certainly think, obviously, being number 10 in the country, Utah has got the most. But they've got to win some of these games convincingly, because they got a schedule behind them where they got to go and play some of the stronger teams in the Pac-12. And they've had some dips and some rises. You got teams out there in the Pac-12 like Washington State. Washington is still a team to be reckoned with, even with that bad loss they had. So you want to see them elevate. They're a chance for the playoff. So I think they're going to win. The question is going to be, who starts to tell their story better.
Right. Well, I mean, 9:00 tonight, little Pac-12 matchup. North versus. Oh no, they're both. Utah is in the South, so both in the same side of the conference, and. Quite frankly, with all the screaming kind of preseason and even in past years that, people don't get to see a lot of Pac-12 football because it's on so late. And then there was the discussion of moving games to 9 a.m. their time, noon ours. And some people like it, some people, I don't know. I mean, you got to win and the fans will come. That's really it. I don't think that has anything to do with it. But at the end of the day, it's an opportunity for us East Coast folks to get a little look at some Pac-12 football if you haven't already. Moving on to the Saturday early games, we did mention Tennessee goes to number 9 Florida. It's on at noon. We're going to actually dive into the bigger matchups towards the end of the cast. So we will dive into that one, as well as Michigan going to Wisconsin. That one as well is at noon. Michigan's ranked 11. Wisconsin's ranked 13. Other matchups in the early games, just to run down. We've got the Crimson Tide playing at home against Southern Miss. That's a noon game. I've said it for multiple times on and off the air, and I'm really still waiting to see that run game get going for Alabama like people know it to get going. I mean, I don't think it's bad, especially compared to, some other schools. It's definitely much more dominant than, maybe an NC State or
Yep.
But it's not the Alabama run game we know of, and I don't know if that's because of the line, because I know those horses, and Najee Harris is a beast, and they've got horses. So, maybe they can get it going against Southern Miss. Southern Miss comes into this game with, it looks like they are 1-2-3-0. So they're undefeated, but, it's Southern Miss. Alabama's going to crush them. At least they should. Next game we want to touch on, we've got Cal, one of the surprising undefeated teams in the Pac-12, traveling down south to take on the Ole Miss Running Rebels. I've always said, a buddy of mine I used to work with went to Ole Miss. It's a bucket list for me. I've never been to Biloxi, or not Biloxi, to Oxford, to the Grove. I really want to go check out a game there. Make sure I wear sunglasses because I am married.
Yeah. I hear you there. Covert hat maybe too. But this is what's kind of interesting to me about this game. You know, you kind of look at it on the surface and you go, doesn't really light the fire. But to touch on a point that you made, which I think is kind of interesting. You know, there's been all this talk about the Pac-12 coming and playing at 12 o'clock and, you know, on the East Coast. To be honest with you, and this happened actually while I was in school at Florida State, USC was a down team at that point, but they traveled and did a home and home with Florida State. And the game was actually out in USC. It was pretty close when we were a strong team. This was in the late 90s. I think it was a 14-7 game out there. We crushed them when they came to Tallahassee. But my answer to this is don't necessarily go and start changing your times. Come out east. Come play teams out
for
east.
sure.
So
I love that.
I like this.
Yep.
While Ole Miss is not particularly strong this year, Cal is a sneaky 3-0 team. Okay?
I don't
beat Washington.
I know. I just haven't. I only saw highlights. I haven't seen enough. Sorry, that's a complete, guy on the East Coast not watching enough Pac-12.
Yep.
I'm trying.
Yep, but this is
they haven't been
how
televised or even at a decent time. And I don't know. What I do think I know is that their defense, in particular, their defensive front for Cal is pretty stingy. And their quarterback is, seems to be getting it done. I just don't know. I mean, Ole Miss, though they are bad, they're in the SEC West. They're at home. It should be interesting. I'm glad you put it on here, and we may not have a ton to chatter about it, but, Cal's ranked at 23 right now. It could be interesting. I'm very interested to see.
Yeah, I just, it's, again, I think this is the solution. You don't have to load up your schedule, but, let's be honest. I mean, we've seen recently FSU play Alabama. We've seen Clemson taking on A&M. Get in that mix. Don't load your schedule with those, meaning don't take all your out-of-conferences, but come east and play. And I think more importantly, don't come east and play let's not play these as the kickoff classic, so to speak, where you go play
a regular
in Dallas.
Season game, man.
Yeah, schedule
this.
Schedule your softies and get a home and home. There's a lot of teams in the Southeast in particular that are willing to do that right now. And get out here and play and get yourself known. And I like what Cal's doing. Ole Miss, I'm sure when they scheduled this game, my guess was this was probably done 3 years plus. This was a tough matchup for them. So I'm interested. Cal's starting to get a little bit of a look, and I want to see, what happens here. And if they, can go into Ole Miss and throw a little beating on them. I know Ole Miss is a little bit more of the doormat of the SEC West, but it still says something because you're going to get some comparables. You're going to see Alabama and A&M and Auburn and LSU play this team, and you'll get some level of comparability. So I'm kind of interested. I want to see this Cal team. I want to see what they got. They, like I said, they are 3-0. They beat a ranked opponent. I want to see it. So that's a fun one that we just threw on there. That's definitely, I think, worth flipping over on the dial and to learn a little bit about what's going on out there on the west side of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the one thing that and it's this is kind of, we've talked about this before with the Elite 11s of the world. Those Nike, the opening and stuff like that. I mean, I hear you, but I liken that stuff for all the different position groups that they do those different things to the NFL Combine. These kids that are getting these recruiting outlets that are ranking these kids, Matt Corral was one of the top kids in the quarterbacks in the country coming out, and he was at the
He's
elite.
a West Coast guy, right? Isn't he? Wasn't he from Mater Dei or something like that?
Yeah,
or something
and
like
he I think made it down to the Elite 11 and then, got bounced. I think he did, or he was on the cusp. If he got cut before the last 11, he was like 12 or 13. I'm telling you. I remember
He was in the
watching
showcase games.
But, I'm just looking at the guy, and it's just like, he went against Arkansas, 16 for 24. He had 2 TDs, 246 yards. Yeah, that's modest. Against Southern Louisiana, he had a better efficiency. Southeastern Louisiana, better efficiency, going 21 for 30 for 239. Again, 2 TDs, so less yards. So there's consistency there. Arkansas, even though they are a conference opponent, a divisional opponent, and I love Coach Chad Morris, he still needs to get the right personnel in there to run the offense he wants, and they're just not very good. And obviously Southeastern Louisiana, well, I'm sorry, who are you? But the first game of the year when they lost to Memphis, the kid went 9 for 19 for 93 yards, no TDs and a pick. So I don't know who this kid is, and my concern is maybe these things like these Elite 11s overrate these kids come out higher ranked and more highly touted than really maybe they actually are. And
Yep.
It's interesting to me, but let's move on from that. We got LSU going to Nashville to take on the Vanderbilt Commodores. LSU is sitting at what's their record? What is their rank right now? Four. Four. They've had the toughest matchup thus far this season in terms of what we've seen. What say you? You lead us off on this. I don't think it'll be much of a contest, but it is SEC West against SEC East. One of the best in the West against one of the worst in the East.
Yeah, I certainly look for LSU to roll. It is a conference game. LSU to me will be worth talking about throughout the entire year. I want to say, even with a loss to Alabama, I think LSU gets in the college football playoff. Again, that's assuming no other losses. That's how strong this team is.
So what if LSU loses to Alabama in the regular season? Alabama goes to the SEC championship game. Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC championship game.
Chaos ensues. And then here's what it's going to come down to, and I'm going to tell you this. So speaking of this game,
one-loss Alabama team that loses in the SEC championship compared to a team they beat that didn't even play in that will sit out.
Well, first of all, so I assume in your assumption everybody's a one-loss team.
Well, no, Georgia could be undefeated going into the game, right. And if they beat Alabama, well, obviously they're going to get a slot.
All right, so let's restate your scenario, and I'll explain where I come from.
Okay, so the scenario is this. The SEC East, Georgia goes undefeated, gets into the SEC championship game.
Yep.
Okay? Alabama goes undefeated, beats LSU during the regular season, obviously goes undefeated, and earns the bid for the SEC West. So LSU has one loss to Alabama in the regular season. Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC championship game. So now Alabama has one loss. Georgia's obviously going to get in. So you're going to say that that LSU gets in over Alabama, even though they didn't play in the SEC championship game, and the one loss they have is to Alabama. And moreover, does Alabama get in if there's another one-loss team that may have won their conference that's more deserving?
Okay. All right, so let me throw a few things at your scenario, and again, I'm prognosticating a little bit here. One, I'm not so sure Georgia goes undefeated. Okay, but we'll play that game that they do go undefeated. So last year, was there any discussion to the fact that Georgia could get into the playoff? Was there a little bit of kerfuffle?
If they had lost,
I'm talking about last year. Georgia had 2 losses last year, right?
Oh, you mean after? There was maybe a little bit of chatter. There was more chatter before they lost the SEC championship game.
Right, but even afterwards, there was
Because-
a large contingent of people that believed that Georgia was a better team than Notre
than
Dame
Notre
team
Dame,
going
right.
in that. Now, and everybody says, okay, well, you know what? If you win the games,
And then we waxed Notre Dame, and
Right.
they're like, "See, Notre Dame sucks." And Georgia beat Notre Dame earlier in the year, correct? That was last year. They beat Notre Dame earlier in the year? Yeah.
No.
Georgia went to Notre Dame last year, and Georgia won.
so Notre Dame did have a loss. Okay,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so
I
but-
thought for a second they were undefeated too, but now I think about it, no, Georgia
right.
went up there and beat them last year. Georgia plays here tomorrow.
But here's my point is, and you said this to me in a side discussion we were having about the idea that the whole point that they created this committee, instead of just going by the BCS or whatever type, collaborative ranking system they wanted to use, was that they were going to choose the 4 best teams in college football. But you've also mentioned to me that for the most part, in the playoff era, the playoff games, particularly the semifinals, have been less than stellar.
Mhm.
So here's kind of my feeling on this.
I do
is
think it's the 4 best teams that they've had every year. I think they've done a good job with that. And then at the end of the day, the team
Do
in
you
the
think
title
the four best teams played last year? I'm not saying did we get the best. So you think Notre Dame was a better team than Georgia last year?
Well, by record, maybe, or by virtue of them playing each other and Georgia winning. But see, that was also early in the season, and that was, I think, before Ian Book took over.
Right. Okay.
So I mean, like it's a tough one though, because I don't know that, but you also have to somehow value, as the committee's making these decisions, they have to value, how the team, the eye test at the end of the year. That's why it's hard to lose at the end of the year. Okay. And you have to value, in terms of the overall schedule, in terms of, at the end of the year, well, Georgia lost in the championship game to Alabama. Again, you can't lose late. So, and they're already putting one SEC team in, and that's the other thing. Like, I get it. The SEC West is the best, but
okay. So
I mean, I think there is, you have a 1-loss Oklahoma, 1-loss Ohio State, a 1-loss Notre Dame team like you did. It came down to, okay, well, Notre Dame lost to a team that's been ranked in the top 4 the whole time. These other 2 teams got beat up by a scrub.
Right. Okay. So let me clarify a couple of things too, just to make sure. But here's part of it. They want to put the best teams. They want to put the best teams in there, right? That's the goal of this.
Correct.
And truthfully, the best teams could be. And I was checking this because I just did not feel like. You had Georgia last year go and play Notre Dame in Notre Dame and win 20-19. Okay, so they beat them head to head. So kind of in the head to head realm, you're already kind of proving my point. Here's what I'm gonna say is they're itching to put the best teams in here. And let's be honest, LSU playing Alabama again or playing Georgia would bring a whole lot of pub to this. I'm not telling you someone's getting left out. I know that sounds crazy, but it's not, because if we get to the chaos scenario where you don't have a lot of undefeated teams, you end up with an undefeated. Let's say your undefeated teams are Georgia and in that scenario Georgia and Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are your 2 undefeateds, and then you got a whole bunch of 1-loss teams, and you get a tough fought Alabama LSU game. Now certainly how they win matters. A tough fought Alabama LSU game, and they're both left with 1 loss. Okay. Who with 1 loss in college football right now? And again, we're early, so I'm playing a little game here, but this is why I'm talking about LSU. Who are you looking at that's going to get in there over them?
I mean,
With a 1
right
loss.
now,
With a one
Oklahoma
loss.
would be the team I
with
would
1
say.
loss.
With 1 loss, yeah.
Okay, so who does Oklahoma lose to? Texas?
Texas, maybe they slip up against Baylor.
Okay, so in that scenario, you're saying a team that loses to an Alabama team that you would earmark in that scenario for a playoff bid, losing but with only 1 loss. Would you earmark them for the playoffs in that scenario?
Alabama?
Alabama. If that scenario played out, would you earmark a losing?
That's what I'm asking you. Because you said that's why I posed this
Yeah.
there. Because if LSU lost a game to Alabama during the regular season, it's a problem for Alabama that they lose late. Again, we've seen that because in this scenario they'd be losing in the SEC championship game. But still, unless Ohio State just looks completely dominant and barely loses to Wisconsin, say in the Big Ten championship game.
Yep.
You're going to have to put Alabama in with their one loss, even though they lost in the SEC. I don't think you can put LSU above them because
Right.
they lost to them.
Right. So,
I don't see how there's any way they're going to put 3 SEC teams in there.
okay.
If in that scenario, that same scenario, I don't see how if that is the case that we get in, Georgia's undefeated, they're in, Alabama has one loss, but they go ahead and put them in. Okay.
Yep.
I don't see how they're going to go put if LSU has that loss to Alabama in over a one-loss Oklahoma that won the Big 12 or a one-loss Ohio State that won the Big 10. As long as it's not the situation last year where Ohio State went to, was it Iowa State or no, that was Oklahoma. Ohio State went to like Purdue. It was Purdue because that kid that had cancer, that was the inspiration. And like, he's like, all I want is them to win. And Purdue beat them up. And because they beat that, they were a lesser team, but not just that, they beat them up. They won by more than 2 touchdowns. That was such a bad loss that when the decision time came at the end of the year, they're like, okay, that's just such a bad loss for Ohio State. They have to get bounced. Notre Dame's getting it because they lost to Georgia.
I think the real scenario is whoever comes out of the West is going to beat the East, and then in which case that's where you're going to allow them to
Well,
get in.
I hear you. That's we'll discuss that again as it goes on. I like it. Let's pose that. Let's pose that scenario if like maybe say Alabama or LSU beats Alabama in the regular season. And LSU wins the SEC against Georgia. Let's do that one again as things continue.
Well, that's
I like that
you
we
can tell my
interjected
feelings
with
with LSU. That's why I put them on there. We're gonna move on to the next game. That was a fun little fodder.
Yeah,
but we got the next game and put this on here. It's a middling.
This is going to be a snooze fest. I got to be
Big
honest.
Ten matchup, but it's Michigan State versus Northwestern. I guess the real question is, can Michigan State rebound from a really less than spectacular performance at home against ASU? And can Michigan State be good enough to be a spoiler to some of the bigger teams? I mean, I guess that to me is really the storyline there. I could see Michigan State going either way on this. They should win this game. But I think,
Northwestern, has been Pat Fitzgerald's a good coach. They're playing at home. I think Northwestern was off last week.
Yeah, and Northwestern's been less than spectacular. They've had trouble with their quarterback play, so just something to keep an eye on, another game to look at.
All right, we are going to roll into the Saturday midday slate. Again, as I said, we're going to touch on these games. The biggest game of this slate is the Auburn Tigers going to College Station, take on the Texas A&M Aggies. That with the earlier games, we will hit those in depth here at the end. So let's see. The other games we got, though, at that midday slot, we've got the Knights of University of Central Florida.
We'll be hanging out at Mickey.
Yeah, we will, but they won't be.
Yeah, they'll be up north.
They will be. They're going up to take on ACC team in the Pitt Panthers. It seemed like Pitt was maybe early on giving a little scare to Penn State last week. Penn State didn't win by much, but if you watch the game after, early on, they started to really kind of take control. I by no means do I think that that Pitt's going to win this game. Again, just like Stanford last week, I don't know where there's explosiveness on Pitt's team that could keep up with UCF. However, Pitt tends to play very well at home. So, we saw that when they beat my Tigers a few years ago up there at Heinz Field. So, maybe something to watch for. Certainly, I'll want to keep an eye on it. And if it's closer than expected, then hooray.
Yeah, I mean,
hooray for the good guys.
And in fairness, talking about the playoff crashers, I mean, UCF scheduled a Stanford team, traditionally a little bit stronger. This is one of their more down years, but then still going and playing another Power 5 in Pitt. Pitt's caused they haven't been able to get it done this year, but they have caused some problems. They've had some injuries. Their defensive line has been hit very hard in the middle. Yet they've again still played a tough game against Penn State on the road. So the question is, can UCF have another statement game against a Power 5 team? Which then talk about your playoff buster. They're itching to raise chaos, and so this is a chance for them to at least pad that resume. So we'll see how this plays out. I wouldn't be shocked by Pitt giving them a tough game, but, I think initial thoughts are that UCF rolls in this eventually, especially if they get out to that fast start like they did against Stanford.
Yeah, it's all over them.
Yeah, so the next game that we're looking at is Miami, Ohio is going to Ohio State. I mean, I don't really have a lot to say about this except Ohio State. Can we get somebody on the schedule that I want to watch?
Well, here's the thing, and it is, again, these are one of those interstate rivals that you'd be surprised because, that there are kids that have played with each other, against each other in high school that are playing on opposite sides of the ball here. But, not always, but in past years, you've seen sometimes Miami of Ohio, give Ohio State a little bit of a game, just like we discussed Pitt doing the same with Penn State early on. But Ohio State's been rolling. Justin Fields has been doing well. I don't anticipate it being much of a matchup, but you're absolutely correct. Let's go. I mean, I think that they're good, and I think that Fields is their guy, but they haven't played anybody.
Yeah, I mean, they'll kind of then leak into playing in Lincoln against Nebraska and then head to Michigan State, then to Northwestern. So, none of them really kind of ruffle my feathers.
Yeah,
but thankfully, at least then they go and play Wisconsin at the end of October. And then I think it starts to get at least a little bit more interesting. Is then they'll have to play Penn State and Michigan.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that plays out. But certainly they are clearly in the hunt for a playoff spot. So we got to keep an eye to them. Moving on, we're going to take a look at Washington versus BYU. Good on them for playing a little earlier in the day, kind of going back to that conversation.
Yeah, these are 3:30 games, y'all. So, good for them.
Yeah, Washington rebounded well after a brutal loss to Cal from a season perspective, as they were they were a front runner and somebody deemed as a potential playoff push. Question is, can they go against a BYU team that's that likes to cause chaos for some teams, and they're tough, as we've talked about the Mountain West out there, and it's in BYU. So,
BYU's coming off a big win, and I like their coach, and I don't think they're too high. I think they're probably stoked. They're amped that they get one big Pac-12 right after the other, and they just won the first one. And, I'm still not a Jacob Eason guy. If you don't know, the kid was the 5-star. He's huge. He's got all the physical attributes, but he's not a student of the game. And this is why when Fromm came in the next year as a freshman, he literally was dragging Eason into the film room, trying to teach him how to, break down film. He was in this, literally, not just saying, he doesn't know how to do it. So I don't know. I don't think he's consistent enough. I think BYU is going to get another one against the Pac-12 this week.
All right, interesting. So moving on, we're going to talk about Kentucky heading to Mississippi State. The real thing on this is, after a heartbreaking miss on, upsetting Florida, can they rebound strong? I like them to. I think Mark Stoops is a good coach. I think Kentucky's a tough team. Remember, too, this is a team that lost its quarterback 2 weeks ago, so they were playing their backup. But I think they can get it done. I do. I think it's an interesting one, just kind of helps the season play out. Be nice to see a little bit more of someone showing up as a contender in the East. Florida has looked less than spectacular in, starting off the season, yet, still winning. So that's important. And then can someone contend with a team like Georgia in the East?
Yeah. Look, it's I think it's a toss up. Mississippi State really hasn't shown me much this year that I can really, nothing's jumping off the tape. This one, to me, if anything, Mississippi State I might lean a little bit that way just because they're home. and those cowbells are annoying as
Ooh.
all get out. I experienced that one year when we played them in a bowl game. It was the Peach Bowl at the Dome. At the Dome, inside the Dome with those cowbells. I mean,
Earmuffs.
It could be it's man, it's worse than like a vuvuzela.
Little blast from World Cups past.
Yep. All right, go on. Another SEC matchup.
Yeah, we got Southern Cal. Excuse me, South Carolina heading to Mizzou. Nothing particular that gets me all excited in this game. Certainly like to see Kelly Bryant continue. USC. I like this Solinsky kid, freshman. He put up a decent fight,
Yeah.
threw up some numbers against an Alabama team. I mean, the game was, not
Yeah, I
really
think he
in
threw
doubt.
for over 300 yards in that game.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to build on there for them. So, it's kind of a game where you just, you watch it. It starts to create and kind of show you the landscape that's going on within the conference. So worth watching. But, something to keep an eye on, too. And certainly I'm sure the people in Missouri and the people in South Carolina are interested.
Sure. All right, now we're going to run down the Saturday late slate, and then, like I said, once again, we'll go through through all the games that we find are the best matchups. So, late slate, you got the Ducks heading down, well, I guess not too far, just to Palo Alto to take on the Cardinal. Yeah, I mean, you know me. I mean, I just said it earlier how much I'm fond of the Stanford and the coaching staff. But if you've listened to this, you also know I'm a Justin Herbert fan. He ran into a good team in Oregon. I was surprised in Auburn earlier in the year. I was actually surprised with the way that outcome went. But he's been on fire ever since, man. And the way I liken it almost to last week. Stanford, even though they had cross country, you've said it for even NFL, but as college, you don't like teams that have to travel like that far. I mean, you're talking the northwest part of California, right? Going all the way down to the southeast, right? So, I mean, you don't like when that has to happen. Stanford going down to UCF, that is. But we talked about the explosiveness of UCF and the lack thereof with Stanford, and Oregon has that as well. They do have explosiveness, and I just don't know how Stanford keeps up.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, Stanford's limping. There's no other way around it. They're a limping program. I think Oregon is, kind of getting their sea legs, and I look for them to roll in this game too.
Yep. And what time's that game at? Is that a 7 or something like that?
7 game. Yep.
Okay.
So then moving on, we've got Oklahoma State taking on Texas. Texas very much in the hunt, put up a massive fight against LSU. And if LSU's as good as I believe they are, it still looks good on their resume. As I mentioned, the Red River rivalry will be in full bloom here in a few weeks. So, can they go and just continue to take care of business? Oklahoma State's always a team that looks to put up a lot of points. The Moulet always has his team ready to score.
I love the Moulet.
So
Even better in person.
Yeah, so it should be interesting to watch this game play out for a little bit. I certainly look for Texas to take care of business and stay in the hunt for a playoff spot.
Okay. Well, I have something to say.
All right.
I actually want to stop for a second. This is going to be a problem for Texas.
Okay.
It's going to be a problem for Texas. The leading rusher in the country sits in the backfield at Oklahoma State in Chuba Hubbard.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a game that I don't know that Oklahoma State has had Texas's number in the past, even in Austin. I think, as a matter of fact, I don't have it pulled up. Shame on me, but I think that the past 2 times they've played in Austin, they've won. When they've been the dog. So you said it, man. The Moulet he's a good coach, and they can sling it as always. With they just seem to have these quarterbacks that can sling it in a Big 12 with some big quarterback names that can sling it, and they always are up there. This is a dangerous game for Texas, because if they think I think they look good and they still have a great shot. they have a shot at the Red River Ride. But here we go. I don't want to dive into other scenarios, but if Texas loses this game, that's 2 losses.
That puts
They're
them out.
done,
Yep,
right?
they're out.
But then you move down the road with the Red River rivalry. Suppose they do, but then they beat Oklahoma, and then you get to the scenario with the SEC coming into play. It's going to get a little dicey, as you like to say.
Oh, let the arguments commence.
But I don't want to stay too long in it because it isn't one of my premier games. But I will forewarn Texas fans, I'd be concerned about this game. Oklahoma State's 3-0 right now. They haven't played much. I mean, Oregon State, Tulsa, McNeese State, but they've dominated them for the most part. And that Chuba Hubbard kid is going like $150 to a deuce every game. He's incredible.
Yep.
So be careful, Texas. My concern is that even though it was a couple weeks ago, the LSU game, and even though they lost, I think, the whole nation, as well as them, and rightfully so, came out of that game feeling good about the program, feeling confident they still have a great road ahead of them, and that, everything's in front of them if they handle their business. They're still in control of their own destiny if they want to be. Mm-hmm. So, but if they go into this game just thinking, Okie State's nobody, they're not even ranked, we're Texas, they're going to be in trouble. Sorry to go on that. I keep looking at this game, and I think it's one to watch. It might be one to watch.
All right, so why don't we move on to your Clemson Tigers at home against Charlotte?
Mm-hmm.
There is that's University of North Carolina, Charlotte.
Yeah.
There's not really much to talk about here. The only thing that I've heard from the Clemson front that I'll stay on a little bit, I'm gonna chime in for your boys, is this nonsense about Trevor Lawrence. This is a game where he goes out. He's gonna play maybe the first half. He's going to put some numbers on the board. It's not going to be to anybody's liking because he's not going to play the whole game. The kid's, he's fine. He's totally fine.
Can I interject? I want you to remember where you left off. But a friend of ours who's actually been on a cast a while ago, Justin Hicks, was over last night. Mm-hmm. And he started nitpicking. And I said what you said is like, when you're an 18-year-old that goes out and does what he did last year and then dominates Alabama in the national championship game, gives them the worst loss ever, this great team, and he's 18 years old, and he is incredible, and everybody's so high on him, nitpicking starts to ensue the following seasons. Don't forget, the young man is still 19 years old. So Hicks is like, yeah. And I said, look, I will bet you 100 juice boxes right now that he will be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. What do you think? I go, you think he's no good? Yeah, I think he's no good. I'm like, if he's no good, then he shouldn't be drafted number 1 overall in the NFL, right? And he's like, oh, he won't get 100 juice boxes, whether it's next year or the year after. I go, and that was our bet. I said, I guarantee you he will be the number 1 pick overall when he comes out.
So you take Trevor Lawrence over the field.
Yeah, so look, I mean, my point is this, and I appreciate you having him back. Like, he's just going to get better. He has thrown more picks, but I saw, and I watch every game, every minute of every game, 2 picks that he's thrown this year that were because they fooled him, disguised coverage, or he did something bad. All the rest of them, one of them was at the end of a half where he just threw it up, and they're all, in non-compromising situations to where we're at in the game. Usually it's just at a point where we're just trying to throw one up for one of our big wide receivers, and maybe it was a bad decision, but it wasn't like he was supremely fooled. I've seen 2 of those.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to this. Anybody that watches, and I'll use pro football as the example. Everybody's heard about the sophomore slump, okay, with quarterbacks. The sophomore slump isn't because guys just totally regress. The sophomore slump is because people get film of these guys. So I want to talk about 2 pieces to this. And then the first one is the film. There's people that saw this tendency from him, saw tendencies last year that they obviously want to take advantage of. So they're going to challenge him in ways that are not the strongest parts of his game, or at least not on film are the strongest parts of his game. But then the other piece of this is understand when you can beat these teams, they're trying to develop this guy. Was not a finished product last year. As phenomenal as he did, he was not a finished product. They are going to start testing things that he sees, things that he reads. They're going to give him more free reign on the offense as opposed to everything being called for him. He's going to start working into different types of scenarios and audibles and checks and reads. And he's doing that right now, and he's doing it because he can. The team can afford the decisions that he's making. And anybody that wants to talk, the kid's arm strength is unbelievable. He is a pretty accurate quarterback. I mean, we're not talking about a guy like Lamar Jackson who comes out with those big question marks there. He's starting to actually run the ball a little bit and doing it effectively. The kid's game is just evolving. He's learning, and part of learning is testing things, and some things don't work and some things do. So, again, I hate to belabor this, and I don't really want to talk about it again on a future cast. It's just nonsense, and I agree that he's going to go number one in the draft, barring any injuries. Quarterbacks are too valuable, and his upside is too high. Jameis Winston, if you remember, this happened with him. Jameis Winston came out as a redshirt freshman and lit the world on fire. His statistics were unbelievable. And you watched him in the next year, and we destroyed just about in fact, we destroyed everybody with the exception of the title game. The closest game was Boston College, and in the end, we separated significantly from them, and his statistics were awesome. And then the next year, we had a lot of close games, Florida State did, with a lot of teams, and all of a sudden, Jameis Winston started throwing picks. Now, Jameis Winston, I think, doesn't have the right attitude and has problems with his mental makeup, which I don't see in Trevor Lawrence. But understand, on a college football playing field, that's what happened there. And yet they still went 14-0. They got smoked by Oregon. They weren't as good of a team. They weren't playing together as a team. And I just think, this is just I see a similar on-field scenario happening without all the baggage that Jameis Winston brings. And yet, here we are. That was the number one pick in the draft. So I agree with you. I belabored that more than I should have. We're going to move on to the next game. We're going to talk about Old Dominion going to UVA. Why don't you go ahead and handle that one?
Yeah, no, we're doing Old Virginia is the, right now they're the only other team that didn't embarrass themselves in the ACC last weekend besides the Tigers. So they managed to get two teams in our conference ranked since Syracuse fell out after us. Well, actually, after them losing to Maryland the week before. Virginia sits at 21. I don't think it's much of a game, although Old Dominion, for some reason, throws a thorn in some of these sides of our ACC compadres. But yeah, nothing much to talk about there. I just wanted to touch on it just because they are ranked in the top 25. So after that, and that game is at 7. The big game of the day, which we'll dive further into, as I said at the end, once we run through the earlier ones that were the big games. Notre Dame, Fighting Irish, coming down to Georgia to take on the Bulldogs. That's the primetime 8 o'clock game on CBS. Game day will be there. Should be a lot of fun. Again, we'll touch on that here in just a few. Moving beyond that, Colorado is going down to take on Arizona State. The Sun Devils. I don't know if you follow our Facebook page. I posted a fabulous Coach Mike Leach rant about the mascots in the Pac-12 and said something about needing like a Harry Potter wizard to figure out what a Sun Devil is or how to defeat it. Awesome quality. Yeah, I mean, Colorado, as under Mel Tucker, is surprisingly, done fairly decent. They did lose last week, though, to Air Force. Yep. So, but
so look out Boise State, too.
Yeah, but they have, not that they're huge ranked teams, but they've taken on Colorado State early, then Nebraska, and now Air Force. So at least, name schools. There's no FCS school that they've had to face yet. But yeah, look, I think that I think Herm Edwards is a better college coach than a lot of us give him credit for. Yep. He's obviously, it goes beyond being a good motivator and to what, the understanding is really be able to connect with some of these kids and not in a way like, maybe Dabo does where he like really gets involved, but connect as a mentor with them and they like it. So, That might be a fun game. No, that game is at Colorado. It's
no,
not.
excuse me, it's at Arizona.
Oh, it is at Arizona
It is
State.
at
Yeah.
Arizona.
Okay. So I'm looking right. Yeah.
No,
So
you're
I
right.
mean, I would kind of maybe, Arizona State. They're still undefeated. They're maybe the class of the Pac-12 South. It's them and Utah. Remember, don't forget Utah is in the South, even though based on their location, that doesn't make sense so much. But
Yeah, I mean, Arizona State went to Michigan State, took on a ranked team. Michigan State did not really look the part of a ranked team in that game. It was a defensive struggle, but they ended up coming away with a tough road win against a known formidable opponent in the Big Ten. So that could be interesting. Colorado's played a little bit of a spoiler and certainly played teams tough. That's enough to be said. So that should be kind of fun to watch.
yeah, I mean, like I've talked to the one guy that I will continue to go, highlight for Colorado is number 2 wide receiver Laviska Shenault. He's had a fairly decent year. He's currently has 16 receptions for 203 yards and 2 TDs. Had a couple rush attempts that worked out well, but he's just, if you watch him, I mean, he's 6'2", and what is that noise, Jack? He's 6'2", 220. I read an article this week that some of the NFL scouts are likening him to Julio Jones,
But bigger.
I mean, that's
high praise.
yeah, man. That is high praise. There's been a lot of receivers that come out that I might have thought looked like Julio. You might have heard inklings, but none so much, I think, as we've heard about Laviska Shenault, and I believe it, man. I've seen him; he's pretty damn good. So this is a guy that you will see get drafted possibly on day 1. If not, I wouldn't think anything past day 2 unless something really bad happens. Number 2 wide receiver for Colorado, Laviska Shenault. I like this guy. What else we got? We got the struggling UCLA Bruins, Chip Kelly, man. I mean, if they don't win a single game, I don't think he's on the hot seat. I think they'll give him one more year, and then if this continues, but it's ugly.
This game is the football version of "Thank you, sir. May I have another?"
Yeah, I mean, this is a 10:30 game going up to Washington State. That's a tough place to play at night, and it'll be 7:30 there, so it's going to hit night anyways. I love Coach Leach. This could be considering Washington State got in a little bit of duking it out last week with Houston on a Friday night. They had an extra day playing that early game, and this is going to be late. Yeah, I think Washington State does their thing. And then the last one I just want to touch on, and it's not a Power 5. Utah State goes to San Diego State at 10:30 tomorrow night. Jordan Love, somebody always to watch, exciting quarterback. And this is a good matchup of, in terms of the group of 5 this weekend. I think this is one of the group of 5 matchup, group of 5 school against group of 5 that might be neat. Kind of late, though. So, all right, brother. Here's the rundown. We are going to now get a little more detailed into some of the games, starting with the 1 o'clock Tennessee at Florida, and then moving into the 1 o'clock Michigan at Wisconsin, and then into the 3:30, 4 o'clock Auburn at A&M. Do you know what time exactly? Is that 3:30 or 4? That's a 3:30. And then we will round out with Notre Dame at Georgia at 8 o'clock. So, all right, the Vols going to Florida.
Let's be honest. Of the 4 games, this is probably the least contested of the games. This game was much more significant in 1997. Back when you had some high flying, and the SEC East owned the SEC.
Yeah.
How
the tables have turned.
Now, really, what the storyline in this game is, you've got a Florida team that's got some really good elements to it, but just does not look complete, but continues to be undefeated. Lost their starting quarterback, Felipe Franks. If you ever see the
Filet
pay.
Filet ape.
So, and not to make fun of him. I mean, it is unfortunate when you take a
Why
huge
not?
injury like that. But the kid is
He's arrogant.
has been
And
polarizing.
he's not good.
And Tennessee, who, it was great to see them, for their fan base, I'm sure, to see them get on a strong win against Tennessee Chattanooga has been a puke fest. Not really. I mean, they've been a puke fest for a long time, but this is a whole new level for them. Certainly puts another one of the 2018 coaching hires into the fire.
Mm-hmm.
So, the question is, can Florida, Ken Trask, who we mentioned earlier, has not started a football game since his high school freshman year, who's going to take over the reins, and what can he do with this offense? I believe they're still without Tony this week, so they got a little bit of a playmakers there. Can they establish the run? Their run game was not terribly awesome last week. And then can Tennessee kind of start building on this? My initial feelings are this is in the swamp. Florida's going to figure out a way to start to separate in this game and probably win it. Probably could see some defensive touchdowns. I would not be shocked to see. But if Tennessee wins, again, as I've mentioned before, let the chaos ensue.
Yeah. I'm not sold on Jarrett Garantano, the quarterback for Tennessee. I don't think Tennessee is either, to be honest with you. I think they've certainly thrown in, the backup is JT Shrout, and then I think they have another kid, Maurer or something like that. So, and they haven't gotten the load, but again, it's not like complete separation. I don't think Tennessee's sold on it. It would be, again, I'm sorry, Florida fans. You're the most overrated team in the country.
Are you really sorry?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's just here's the light at the end of the tunnel for Florida fans. I think they are better off now and certainly moving forward the rest of this season, and moreover into next season when he gets an off season underneath him with Trask. I said it earlier in the week. I mean, like, Mullins at the beginning of the year really felt that Felipe Franks had taken that next step in his offense underneath him, and he's the quarterback. Like, he's one of those quarterback whisperers, Mullins, right? And I didn't see that. If anything, I saw it get worse. So, I mean, like, and I don't think Dan Mullen's wrong, but I just, you'd think the guy at some point would, especially with the coach believing him, you'd see what he's seeing, I guess. And so I do think they're better off without that guy. So Trask, we'll see, but it would be something if Tennessee happens to, pull off some sort of crazy upset. I don't think it's going to happen, but yeah, we'll see. It could be interesting to watch. I'll be checking the score and maybe flipping back to a little bit, looking at some highlights. But the other game at 1 o'clock or noon, the Wolverines heading to Camp Randall for a little jump around and
jump up, and touchdown.
That's right. And both teams had a bye last week in preparation for this. I heard a little stat. There hasn't been, I think it's been since I thought they said, was it 1987? 1997 maybe? South Carolina Gamecocks, has there been a team to start the first two games of the season having scored over more than 100 points and blanked their opponent? Well, Wisconsin's one of them.
Yep.
And we talked about it before. They look like the big uglies up front that you're used to seeing on the offensive line with Wisconsin, and a stellar running back. And Jonathan Taylor looks like he did the first year he broke into college football, where everyone was like, who's this guy? He had a good year last year, less than what was expected, but the team was also down. So in trots, the Harbaughs. If we haven't discussed, I think we have. I mean, the hype on Michigan this year, I think, is solely due to the fact that the Big Ten East Urban Meyer left. And so naturally, then it's Harbaugh's division. It's Harbaugh's league. So here they come. I think Michigan, they did lose a lot of pieces on defense. They're not the defense they were last year, but I think that is their saving grace, is that I think they still have a pretty good defense. They have a decent defensive coordinator, because certainly I don't think Shea Patterson, and we've talked about our problems with him. So this is, it's a little bit of a clash of the Titans. Now, don't get it twisted. It's a Big Ten game.
Yep.
Probably not going to be like tons of points on the board, but you may see a few explosive plays here and there.
Well, let me give you a little bit of outline too. Is Wisconsin's averaging 55 points a game to Michigan's 32. You know, Michigan obviously had that high-profile struggle with Army this year. Here's the thing: is Wisconsin's a way more complete team to me. Right now the passing yards, Wisconsin's going for 300 a game versus Michigan's 226. The rushing yards, Wisconsin's going for 216 on the ground versus 170 for Michigan. To me, I think here's the big problem is I just don't see the step that they needed Shea Patterson to make is not happening. I think Shea Patterson is about as much as you're going to get out of him right now. Yeah. I think Wisconsin has found a quarterback, but here's the difference between the Army team that they faced. You knew Army was going to set up and run, and they were going to play some misdirection with that option attack. These guys are going to get in the eye, and they are going to slam you. I'll be honest, this might be a game in the first half. I just look for Wisconsin to roll in the end. I think it's like watching Jonathan Taylor. I mean, the guy, once he's past that line of scrimmage, God help you. God help you. And I just,
over or under on 100 yards for Taylor?
Over.
I mean, again, I think that Michigan's saving grace is their defense. So it's going to be up to them.
Yeah, but I will say this. Wisconsin's defense is no joke.
No.
And I think here's the thing that I like about them. I can't really figure out Michigan's identity as much as I should be able to at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
I know what Wisconsin's identity is, and they are doing it.
Yep.
Like they are lining up, and they are just curb stomping you on the line of scrimmage.
Well, I mean, part of that is I don't think we've known since Harbaugh has been there what the identity, at least of the offense, is at Michigan. Yep. I mean, even though they had a down year last year, Wisconsin did, that they're getting back to what we're used to seeing with Wisconsin football. Yep. So it's no surprise. That's their identity. Like you said, they're going to the big ugly, they're going to line you up, and they're going to smash you in the mouth.
Yeah, and I think they are a more complete team, and I think Wisconsin is going to be one to reckon with all the way throughout. They do have a tendency to lose a game that they really shouldn't somewhere along the line.
They do, and
I don't think Michigan's that game.
Where is
Wisconsin?
I know that, but we mentioned it earlier. Ohio State and Wisconsin get a game this season, before the championship game. Because they're on opposite sides. Where's that game?
I just had it up. It's on the 26th, but that's going to be. Listen. I'm putting Wisconsin right up there with all of them. So this isn't a challenging game for a highly ranked opponent.
They're 13 right now. Michigan's sitting at 11.
I think Wisconsin's underranked.
They're one again. I think they could beat the crap out of Florida at 9. I don't think that's even a question. They do go to the Horseshoe for that game though on October 26th. I think that's going to be one of the things that could help Ohio State, because I'm with you. I think Wisconsin, they're not flashy, and again, we talk about teams that can make explosive plays and that can that type of offense can be put on you. I don't know that they have that. They may need that in the end, but in terms of their conference, they can hang.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I just, you know what? Like I said early on in this conversation, is the first 3 weeks are determining what your identity is, and the next 3 weeks are about proving it. Wisconsin is already into that. They've already started to prove that. I see it. I think this is This is a huge pressure game for Harbaugh in my mind. This is
Mm-hmm.
a huge pressure game.
I mean, what if they get embarrassed?
Yeah, like this. I mean,
Will we see if Shea Patterson continues with the fumbles? Will the guy finally do what we've been saying
play
and
McCaffrey?
put McCaffrey in the game? I mean, goodness gracious.
I don't know. Yeah, it could happen that way. So that I that's kind of what I see. I'm usually in a rivalry game like that, not so bullish on one team, but this one I'm just seeing it. I think Michigan's got all they can handle in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, just to wrap this conversation out. I mean, we're very negative on Michigan, and I feel like they've kind of earned it. Like you said, we don't really know, so I think it's more of like an unknown. But I mean, if Michigan does come out and dominate, then what does that mean? I mean, whew.
Well,
I mean, it can happen.
Yeah, they could. That they have to, and that's kind of what we're looking to see. Like everybody's looking to see Michigan look like a team that is ranked where they're ranked, and
Right.
we haven't seen it so far.
Yep. All right. Saturday at 3:30, the Auburn Tigers head down to College Station to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. Auburn currently sits at number 8 in the country, while Texas A&M sits at 17. You know, they did lose the one game they lost, obviously, to my Clemson Tigers, so not going to take too much of a hit for that. Dive in, brother.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is going to be a game where we're going to see how much Auburn's defensive line can get at the Texas A&M offensive line. But even within that, then, is the opposite side of this is, can Nix stay within himself? I don't think they can afford what happened with Oregon. Like, I don't think there's going to be this big magic at the end.
Well, and this is his first road test
SEC
as a
test,
starter.
Yeah.
No, overall as the starter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he played Oregon. Oh, that's as a start. Okay. So yeah, but he played Oregon.
Yeah, but that was on a neutral
Neutral-
site. I'm
right,
not
you're
like
talking
going
a road
into enemy
game.
territory.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure on him in this game.
And that's a tough place to play.
Yeah, I mean, I think this game's going to go to the wire. I really do. I don't think it's going to be. It's interesting. I mean, this is an 8 versus 17, but the 17 is getting 3.5 at home, which is pretty much a wash on a neutral field.
Correct.
So the feeling is that this is going to be a pretty much a balanced game. I don't. You know what? I'm kind of moving in two different directions. My gut tells me that Auburn's going to pull this one out. And we just got to see. This is, I guess, my first time to see the response to what happened at Clemson of what this team really is. Is that just getting beat by just such a dominant team, or is that kind of was there enough, negativity driven from that, or maybe not negativity, just doubt maybe placed in this team? Kellen Mond can get it going. I mean, but he can be shut down too. Like, so it's kind of it's unbalanced in that sense of like, which guy are you going to get? I don't know. I really, this one has got me I keep kind of wavering back and forth, but my initial gut is that Auburn can take this game and win that tough one on the road. I do think, I've kind of said it before, I think the top tier of the SEC West is Alabama and LSU, and there's a noticeable separation between Auburn and Texas A&M, but Auburn and Texas A&M are still very strong opponents. And then there is everybody else, and that probably includes the SEC East for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest with you. This game could shake some things up because if it's lopsided, if it's not close, which I think it could get lopsided, but I don't know which side. I just think that somebody might be able to. I lean Texas A&M's side just based on the experience of Mon versus the experience of Nix, and based on them playing at home. But if it gets lopsided, they already have a loss. Then maybe I'm just like. I don't want to say Auburn's overrated. I just feel like 8's high for them. I don't know that they're that good, but it's the SEC and the SEC West bias. I get it with the SEC West, but they have a lot of teams ranked, and a lot of them in the top 10 at that. Like, I just don't know if Auburn is a number 8 team. And so I guess what I'm getting at is if A&M beats the crap out of them, then then what happens? Do they tumble like completely out of it? Do they?
Well, not. I think like the bias matters. But
Yeah, I know. I just I'm interested to see, man, because I know everybody's talked about the defensive line for Auburn, and they are good, but A&M's offensive line has some veterans as well, my friend. I mean, they're not bad.
Yeah,
I think
no,
they
no,
only
I
have
agree.
like one like newer guy. Like all the other guys have logged like tons of snaps. They've got junior. I mean, sophomore. I mean, like there's only like a freshman or two, and I don't think they're the ones starting. So that's going to be a battle in the trenches as well. I think that A&M's defense is better than they showed against Clemson, but I said this too, and call me a homer. That's the strongest 14-point win you may see this season. Don't get it twisted. They scored a touchdown at the end, and it was almost mercy. It was on there were some backups in there, and we had control the whole game.
Yep.
Go ahead and look at the stats for Texas A&M's offense, and what our defense with all those new guys, because we lost all those guys to the NFL getting a crack at like their first big opponent. Yeah, look at the stats. We own them. So we'll see. It's gonna be a good game. It's gonna be a good game.
Yep.
The grand finale, again, the game of the day, ESPN Game Day, heading over to Athens. Between the Hedges, last year the Georgia Bulldogs in the home-and-home series played away in South Bend. I know, obviously, being in Atlanta, tons of Dog fans. I think we touched on it earlier in the season. It was like a tremendous weekend for Georgia fans because they had even packages put together to fly up to Chicago, see the Braves play the Cubs. There was buses driving you an hour and a half, 2 hours on Saturday to South Bend to see the Dogs, and then come back to see the Falcons play the Bears on Sunday, I think it was, or maybe Monday. So it was a tremendous weekend, and certainly for Dog fans, they got the big win last year up at South Bend. I think it was... I'm afraid last year was, even though the Dogs won, was a closer matchup than we're going to see this year. Yep. And I say that because I think the Fighting Irish, we're going to see, man. I don't know that they're going to be able to win. I don't think they have what it takes in the trenches, and I know Georgia's good. We've spoken on how I'm concerned about their pass rush in terms of getting sacks from last year. Get a little better, it seems, to start out this year, but they were the worst in the SEC last year in terms of sack totals. And the receivers. I mean, I saw a couple young kids actually last week. I think they played Murray State. Dominic Blaylock scored, freshman wide receiver from about a mile up the road, Walton High School. Good kid. I've watched Blaylock play, grow up in high school play. He's good, and he's a good kid. But they still, I think, are missing what they're used to at wide receiver, which is why Fromm hasn't really put up gaudy numbers. But at the end of the day, they're a ground and pound team. So, yeah, man, this could be troublesome for Notre Dame because I don't know that they have what it takes to handle the offensive line or the run game, not just really in the trenches. They do have some decent, surprising, I think their D tackles are better than you think, but really in the linebacking core, which is, against a running team like Georgia, you need some really fast, hard-hitting, smart linebackers. And I don't know that they have that at Notre Dame right now.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes when I'm kind of looking at a game and it just doesn't make sense to me, like, for example, you got a 3 versus 7, yet you've got 14.5 points being given. I don't know that you should ever be a dog for 14.5 and be a top 10 team. I guess what I see in this is when I kind of see these games, I try to look and go, okay, let's break it down to 4 pieces of the game. You've got your pass defense, you got your rush defense, you got your rush offense, and your pass offense. And I look at Notre Dame, and the struggle I have with them is usually you can say, okay, a great team can hang their hat on at least 2 things, probably 3. And I'll use Alabama and Clemson as an example. When I look at Clemson right now, their biggest concern, and I'm throwing out some air quotes there when I say concern, is their passing attack right now. I mean, like, that's getting the most scrutiny, which means they're complete on defense and they can run the ball. So they've got 3 or 4 pieces of that puzzle that really are humming, and with the idea that they also have what's projected as probably the best quarterback in college football. Some people believe it now. Some people are falling off that bandwagon, but still, you're just missing a piece of the puzzle. And I look at and you alluded to the idea that, with Georgia and their ground and pound, being able to play defense, I look at Notre Dame and I can't figure out where are they rock solid in those 4 phases. I don't see it in the passing attack. I don't see it in the running attack on offense. Can they be good? Yeah, but are they consistently able to rely on that? And then, as you mentioned, going back into the pass and the rushing defense, none of it really just stands out to me as spectacular. And I think that poses a challenge for a team going up against a potential playoff team, and it poses, a problem for playing against a top 10 team. And I don't see it in Notre Dame. And this is going to be one of those years, and they've had several of them where it's just like, are they just getting ranked because they're Notre Dame? That question's out there year after year. They've gone to the playoff and gotten smoked.
Yeah, but everybody in the quarterfinals has gotten smoked.
Right, but they haven't one of those years progressed.
Or semifinals.
Semifinal, but they haven't progressed, and so the question now becomes, are they really that good? Like I said, I go back to those 4 pieces of the game, and I just don't see between rush offense, rush defense, pass offense, and pass defense. I don't see where they dominate in any one of those phases to a point where I'd say, like, okay, if all else fails, we know we can stop the run.
We can lean on this.
Yeah, we can lean on this. I just don't see it, and I think, and then going on the road, there's, tickets are $500 plus, so there is
for the nosebleeds.
And
yeah, that was my point before.
A lot of talk.
Georgia fans went in droves up there, and we talked about it earlier. We saw some Notre Dame fans here. They're going to travel, or not even that. There's Notre Dame fans that live all over the country because they don't stay in South Bend. They may go to Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw some here, so it's going to be a packed house, man. It should be rocking up in Athens, and I've talked to multiple people, a few going to the game, a few that are like, man, I wish, So I don't know. This is important for Notre Dame because looking down the schedule, and though they do schedule good teams, but without a conference championship, they do have a tough schedule, but it's always based on the way those teams are really playing that year because, they get your USCs. They're still, I don't think they're certainly a high-level opponent for a team that should be ranked in the top 10. They got Navy, they got Virginia Tech, they got Duke and Boston College. Love those teams or ACC teams, but come on. Stanford, who usually could be a team at the end of the year, well, we're seeing that, especially on the defensive side. So they have Virginia. We'll see. That's next week in South Bend. But the other game they really have is Michigan, and kind of go back. What if Wisconsin smokes Michigan? Then what are they worth? So
especially
so
after
Notre
they
Dame
roll
really
through Ohio
needs.
State.
This is it, man. They need to, if they want a shot at the playoff, they've got to win tomorrow, and I don't know how that's going to happen.
Yeah. So I mean, those are kind of the battles that are out there. This is a week where we're getting a little bit more intense. Last week was kind of a little bit of a lull, though there were
some.
You don't sleep on the games because some things happened that we weren't expecting, and that's why we watch.
Saturday.
But this is, this slate has definitely got a little bit more impact to it, and we'll see how it plays out.
Yep. Excited for it. We'll get this out there and up as soon as we can. Again, we will have edited cast next week as we will be in Orlando with the fam, Disney World, but we will be throwing stuff up there before and after. If we sound like we're dragging a little bit, sorry, that would be at the end of the day of my legs falling off.
And the youngsters dragging us around.
But it'll be fun nonetheless, and like I said, we're not going to leave you high and dry. We'll get all of our stuff up there. Enjoy the weekend, enjoy the games. Hopefully your team gets a big win. We out!